Ladies and gentlemen, today I want to talk about something we often overlook: the power of silence, distance, and self-worth. We live in a world where people take kindness for granted. They assume you will always be available, always forgiving, always waiting. But the moment you step back, when you stop chasing, something magical happens. They start to notice your absence. They feel the weight of your silence. And soon they come running back. Why? Because people only value what they think they might lose. They beg when they realize they no longer have easy access to you. Stepping back isn't about being arrogant. It's about knowing your worth. Staying silent isn't about being weak. It's about letting actions speak louder than words. And when they finally beg for your presence, you realize one thing: you were the prize all along. People take availability for granted because human nature often fails to appreciate what is consistently present. When someone is always there offering support, kindness, and attention, others start seeing it as a given rather than a privilege. They begin to assume that no matter what happens, that person will always be available, waiting and ready to respond. But what they fail to realize is that nothing lasts forever, especially not patience. When you are always accessible, people start to feel entitled to your presence. They no longer see it as something special or valuable, but rather as something they expect. It's not that they intentionally mean to take you for granted, but comfort breeds complacency. They stop making an effort. They stop saying thank you. They stop considering your feelings because in their mind, you are always going to be there. This is why stepping back is so important. The moment you remove yourself, even just slightly, people feel the shift. They start to sense the absence of your energy, the lack of your presence, and the silence where there used to be words. And that's when it dawns on them what they once overlooked was actually significant. What they dismissed was actually valuable. It's only in your absence that they begin to truly see your worth. People wake up when something they once had unrestricted access to is no longer available. They start questioning why you're no longer answering as quickly, why you're no longer reaching out first, why the attention they once took for granted is suddenly missing. And in that moment, they realize they miscalculated. They assumed you would always be there, but now they are left wondering if they lost something they can never get back. The moment you step back, people realize what they had because absence forces awareness. When something or someone is always available, it becomes routine, expected, and even overlooked. People get used to the idea that you will always be there, always listening, always supporting, always showing up when they need you. But when you remove yourself from that equation, suddenly they feel the void. They notice the silence where laughter used to be, the space where your presence used to fill. And in that silence, in that empty space, they start to reflect. At first, they may not acknowledge it. They may convince themselves that nothing has changed. But deep down, something starts to feel different. Conversations aren't as engaging anymore. Moments that once felt complete now feel lacking. They try to distract themselves, believing they don't need you, but then a familiar situation arises, one where they would typically turn to you. And that's when the realization hits them. You were more than just an option. You were a source of stability, comfort, and presence that they didn't fully appreciate until it was no longer freely given. What makes this realization even more powerful is that it's not something that can be taught. It must be felt. You can't explain to someone that they are taking you for granted and expect them to understand. They have to experience what life feels like without you. They have to sit with the absence, compare it to the presence they once had, and feel the difference. And the moment that awareness sets in, they no longer see you as ordinary. They see you as valuable. They recognize what they failed to before. You were never just there. You were a choice they should have appreciated while they had the chance. Silence is powerful because it forces people to confront the things they've been ignoring. When you argue, explain, or justify yourself, people can dismiss your words. They can twist them, debate them, or simply refuse to listen. But silence cannot be debated. It cannot be ignored. It lingers, it unsettles, and it demands attention in a way that words never could. When you stay silent, you remove the opportunity for manipulation. You stop engaging in the cycle of back and forth explanations where people pretend not to understand your feelings or disregard your worth. Instead, you give them the most undeniable response of all: nothing. And in that nothingness, they are forced to reflect. They are left alone with their thoughts, their assumptions, and their choices. At first, they might act like they don't care. They may pretend that your silence doesn't affect them, but as time passes, the weight of it grows heavier. They start wondering why you haven't reached out, why you're not explaining yourself like you used to, why you are no longer reacting the way they expected. And that's when they start to realize that something has changed, something that is no longer in their control. Silence is unsettling because it shifts the power dynamic. Instead of you chasing, explaining, or trying to make things right, you let them sit with the discomfort of their own actions. You let them question themselves instead of questioning you. And in that silence, they begin to see the truth they ignored when you were speaking. They begin to realize the value of your presence, not through your words, but through the absence of them. Never beg for attention, love, or respect, because the moment you do, you hand over your power. You show people that you are willing to lower your value just to be seen, heard, or acknowledged. But the truth is, anything that requires begging is not worth having. Genuine love, real attention, and true respect should come naturally. They should be given freely, not extracted through desperation. The more you chase something, the more it runs away from you. The more you plead for someone's time, the more they take you for granted. Because when you beg, you send a message that you're willing to settle for less than you deserve. People notice when someone is desperate for their approval, and often they respond by valuing that person even less. It's human nature. What is easily obtained is rarely appreciated. When you are always available, always willing to do anything just to keep someone's presence in your life, they don't see that as devotion, they see it as weakness. They start treating you as an option rather than a priority. They assume that no matter how they treat you, you will always be there, waiting for them to give you the attention, love, or respect that they should have given freely in the first place. But when you stop begging, everything shifts, the energy changes. Instead of trying to prove your worth, you let your absence do the talking. Instead of forcing people to recognize your value, you let them realize it on their own. And if they don't, then they were never meant to be part of your life in the first place. Love, respect, and attention should never be things you have to fight for. They should be things that are given effortlessly by those who truly care about you. Instead of explaining yourself, let your absence do the talking. Words can be ignored, dismissed, or argued with, but actions, or the lack of them, are undeniable. When you step away, you remove the opportunity for excuses, justifications, and empty promises. You stop feeding into the cycle of trying to make people understand your worth when they were never truly listening in the first place. There is a certain power in walking away silently. When you stop trying to convince someone of your value, they are left to confront their own actions. They are forced to sit with the reality of your absence, and suddenly they begin to realize all the things they never noticed before. They see the effort you put in, the presence you brought, and the love you gave so freely. And for the first time, they have to question whether they made a mistake in taking it all for granted. People often don't listen to words. They respond to change. When you keep explaining yourself, they tune you out. They assume you will always try to make things right, always fight for their understanding, always be the one to bridge the gap. But when you remove yourself, that's when they start listening. That's when they begin to notice what they failed to appreciate before. And by then, the lesson is already learned. Your worth was never something that needed to be explained. It was something they should have valued all along. People only chase what they think they are losing because in human nature, the fear of loss is often stronger than the desire for gain. When something or someone feels secure, people tend to overlook its value. They assume that no matter how they act, that person or opportunity will always be there. But the moment they feel it slipping away, panic sets in. Suddenly, what they once ignored becomes urgent. What they took for granted now seems precious. They start running, chasing, and doing everything in their power to regain what they once neglected. This is why the most powerful move you can make is to step back. When people believe you are always available, they don't make an effort. They don't appreciate the time, love, or energy you give because they assume it will always be there. But when they sense distance, when they feel that you are no longer within easy reach, they begin to reevaluate everything. They start to remember the little things, your kindness, your support, your presence. They begin to realize that they never really considered what life would be like without you, and now that they are faced with the possibility, they feel an urgency to act. This isn't manipulation, it's simply human psychology. People want what they can't have. They appreciate what they feel they might lose. And while you should never play games or intentionally create distance just to provoke a reaction, you should always be aware of your worth. If someone only values you when they think they are losing you, then the real question is, did they ever truly value you at all? And once you step back and they come running, the decision will no longer be theirs. It will be yours. Let actions speak louder than words, because words can be deceptive, but actions reveal the truth. People can promise anything, say all the right things, and make you believe they understand your worth, but words without action are empty. They hold no weight unless backed by consistent effort. Someone who truly values you will not need constant reminders, explanations, or ultimatums. They will show their appreciation through the way they treat you, not just through the things they say. Many people make the mistake of holding on to words rather than looking at actions. They listen to promises instead of observing behavior. They hold on to the hope that someone will change just because they said they would, even when their actions repeatedly prove otherwise. This is why you must always focus on what people do, not what they say. If someone truly respects you, they will act accordingly. If they truly love you, their actions will reflect it. If they truly value you, they won't need to be reminded of your worth. On the other hand, when you remove yourself from a situation and let your absence do the talking, it sends a stronger message than any words ever could. It forces people to confront their behavior, to reflect on their actions, and to realize that their words alone are no longer enough. Instead of trying to convince someone of your worth, you simply stop showing up for people who don't show up for you. And in that silence, in that withdrawal, they finally see the truth they ignored when you were still there explaining yourself. They will return when they realize your worth, but by then it may be too late. People often fail to appreciate what they have until they no longer have it. As long as you are available, they assume they can always come back whenever they please. They believe you will always answer, always care, and always be there waiting. But the moment you step back, something shifts. They start to feel your absence. They begin to compare the way things were when you were in their life versus how it feels without you. And suddenly, they see what they refused to acknowledge before. You were never just an option. You were the difference between feeling complete and feeling empty. At first, they may pretend not to care. They may act as if your absence doesn't bother them. But time has a way of revealing the truth. As they go about their days, they will encounter moments that remind them of you. They will hear a song, see something familiar, or face a situation where they once turned to you for comfort. And in those moments, regret will begin to creep in. They will start questioning why they didn't treat you better, why they assumed you would always be there, why they let their ego get in the way of appreciating you while they had the chance. But by the time they realize all of this, you may have already moved on. Because while they were taking their time figuring out what they lost, you were busy rediscovering your worth. You were healing, growing, and learning that you never needed to beg for attention or force anyone to see your value. And when they finally reach out, when they try to come back, the decision will no longer be theirs to make, it will be yours. The choice will be yours because you are no longer the same person who once waited for validation. You have evolved beyond the need for external approval. You have learned that true self-worth comes from within, not from whether someone finally realizes what they had in you. When they come back, you will have the clarity to see whether they genuinely changed or if they are simply reacting to the fear of losing you. You will no longer fall for empty promises or superficial efforts. You will assess their actions, not just their words, and determine whether they truly deserve a second chance. And the most powerful part, by the time they beg for your presence, you may no longer want them in your life. Because stepping back didn't just teach them a lesson, it also taught you one. It showed you that you were always enough, always worthy, always valuable. And you don't need to accept someone back just because they finally realized it. You get to choose whether they still fit into the person you have become. And that is the ultimate power, knowing that their regret does not define your worth. Letting actions speak instead of words is one of the most powerful things you can do because words can be manipulated, misunderstood, or ignored, but actions are undeniable. People can promise they will change, say they care, or tell you they understand your worth, but if their actions do not align with their words, then those words mean nothing. Too often, people get caught up in the illusion of words, holding on to apologies and empty promises, hoping things will be different this time. But the truth is, real change, real love, and real respect are all proven through consistent actions, not just fleeting words spoken in moments of guilt or desperation. When someone truly values you, they don't need reminders to treat you with respect. They don't need to be told how to act or how to show appreciation. They just do it. They make an effort because they genuinely care, not because they are afraid of losing you or because they feel guilty. But when someone's actions continuously contradict their words, it's a sign that they never truly meant what they said. People can lie with their words, but their behavior will always reveal their true intentions. This is why the most powerful thing you can do is to step back and allow actions to reveal the truth. Stop explaining, stop pleading, stop trying to make someone see what should already be obvious. Instead, observe. Watch what they do when you are no longer putting in all the effort. See if they step up when you step back, and if they don't, then that tells you everything you need to know. Actions always speak louder than words, and the truth is always found in what people do, not in what they say. Instead of explaining yourself, let your absence be your response. People often don't listen when you repeatedly try to express your feelings, especially when they have already convinced themselves that they are right. They hear you, but they don't truly listen. They dismiss your words, minimize your emotions, and assume that you will always be there to explain yourself again. But when you remove yourself from the situation and refuse to engage in the cycle of trying to make them understand, something changes. They can no longer ignore the impact of their actions because you are no longer there to absorb the consequences. Silence is uncomfortable. It forces people to sit with their own thoughts, their own guilt, and their own realizations. When you stop explaining, they're left with nothing but the weight of their own actions. They start to wonder why you are no longer responding the way you used to, why you have stopped justifying yourself, why you no longer seem bothered by their behavior. And in that silence, they are forced to face a truth they could easily avoid when you were still talking. At first, they may act like they don't care. They may pretend that your silence doesn't affect them. But as time goes on, they will feel the shift. They will notice the absence of your energy, your attention, your presence. They will realize that they were never entitled to your explanations, your time, or your effort. And by the time they understand what they lost, it may be too late. Because while they were busy ignoring your words, you were learning that you never needed to explain yourself to someone who refused to listen in the first place. People only chase what they feel they are losing because the fear of loss is often more powerful than the comfort of possession. When someone believes that you will always be there, they don't feel the urgency to appreciate you. They assume they have all the time in the world to mistreat you, neglect you, or take you for granted. But the moment they sense that you are slipping away, everything changes. Suddenly, they see what they failed to appreciate before. They recognize the effort, the love, the presence that they once ignored. And in that realization, desperation sets in. They start to remember the way you made them feel, the way you supported them, the way you were always there, even when they didn't deserve it. They begin to see the little things that once seemed insignificant, but now feel irreplaceable. And when they feel like they are losing you, they start to chase, to beg, to do everything they should have done when they had the chance. But by then, it's no longer about what they want, it's about what you decide. This is why stepping back is so powerful. It forces people to make a choice. Either they realize your worth and step up, or they let you go and prove that they were never truly meant to stay. And either way, you win. Because you are no longer settling for someone who only values you when they think they are losing you. You are only allowing space for those who appreciate you while they have you. The choice will always be yours, and that is the greatest power of all. When you stop explaining yourself, when you stop begging for love, when you stop settling for less than you deserve, you shift the balance. You are no longer at the mercy of someone else's decisions. Instead, you stand firm in your own worth, knowing that you never had to prove anything to anyone. And when they finally beg for your presence, when they finally wake up to what they lost, you will realize one thing: you never needed their validation in the first place. Walking away is not a sign of weakness. It is a display of strength, self-respect, and an unwavering belief in your own worth. Too often people stay in situations where they are unappreciated, undervalued, or mistreated because they fear that leaving means giving up. But the truth is, walking away is one of the most powerful choices you can make. It sends a clear message, not just to others, but to yourself, that you refuse to settle for less than you deserve. People who take you for granted do so because they believe you will never leave. When they assume that no matter how they behave, no matter how little effort they put in, you will always be there, waiting, forgiving, and accepting whatever treatment they choose to give. This belief is what allows them to continue their patterns of neglect, indifference, or even disrespect. But the moment you walk away, that illusion shatters. They are forced to confront the reality that you were not someone they could keep mistreating without consequence. At first, they may act as if they don't care. They may pretend that your absence doesn't affect them. But over time, they start to feel the weight of what they lost. They begin to see the difference between having you in their life and living without you. The comfort they once took for granted is gone. The constant reassurance of your presence disappears. And in that emptiness, regret starts to settle in. Walking away is powerful because it shows that your worth is not dependent on someone else's recognition of it. You are not waiting for validation, approval, or acknowledgement. You are not begging for love, attention, or respect. You are simply making the choice to remove yourself from a situation that no longer serves you. And when you do this, everything changes. People suddenly see you differently when they realize you are no longer easily accessible. They start remembering all the little things they once ignored. The way you supported them, the kindness you showed, the effort you put in. They replay moments in their mind, wondering why they didn't appreciate you more when they had the chance. And for the first time, they truly understand that you were not just another person in their life, you were someone irreplaceable. But by the time they reach this realization, you will have already evolved. Walking away is not just about teaching others a lesson. It is about rediscovering yourself. It is about finding the strength to prioritize your own happiness, to embrace your own worth, and to focus on your own growth. When you step back from those who took you for granted, you open yourself up to new possibilities, new connections, and new opportunities that align with your value. And when they finally come back, when they finally understand what they lost and beg for another chance, you will have a choice to make. But the most powerful thing is that you will no longer be the same person who once waited for them to see your worth. You will have outgrown the version of yourself that accepted less than you deserved. And in that growth, you will realize that walking away was never about making them regret losing you. It was about finding the strength to choose yourself over anyone who failed to see your value in the first place. The ultimate power lies in knowing your worth and never settling for less. When you finally understand that you do not need to prove yourself to anyone, you become untouchable. The moment you stop seeking validation from people who fail to appreciate you, you free yourself from their control. You no longer depend on their recognition to feel worthy, and that is when everything changes. People will always try to test your boundaries, to see how much you will tolerate, how much you will give, and how far they can push you before you finally say enough. And if you allow it, they will continue to take advantage of your kindness, your patience, and your willingness to understand. But the second you withdraw, the second you refuse to tolerate anything less than what you deserve, you shift the power dynamic. Suddenly they realize that you are not someone they can manipulate, string along, or keep as an option. They are forced to recognize that you are not someone who waits around to be chosen. You choose yourself first. Walking away is not about teaching them a lesson. It is about teaching yourself that you deserve better. It is about understanding that your time, energy, and love are valuable, and that anyone who fails to appreciate them does not deserve them. When you step back, you are no longer feeding into the cycle of begging for attention, forcing connections, or tolerating half-hearted effort. You are making it clear that you will only accept what aligns with your worth. At first, they may not react. They may think that you are bluffing, that you will eventually come back, that you will still be there waiting for them to change. But as time passes, as they feel the emptiness left behind by your absence, they begin to realize what they lost. They start to see that the energy you once poured into them was rare, that the effort you gave was not something they can find just anywhere. And when they finally understand this, they come running. But the most powerful realization is that by the time they beg for you back, you may no longer want them. Because walking away is not just about leaving a situation. It is about evolving beyond it. It is about becoming the kind of person who no longer settles, who no longer waits, and who no longer accepts anything less than they deserve. And in that transformation, you will find the greatest strength of all, the strength to choose yourself. And so when they finally come back, when they finally realize what they lost and beg for another chance, the choice will no longer be theirs. It will be yours. But by then, you will have already changed. You will have grown into someone who no longer seeks validation, who no longer waits for people to recognize your worth. You will understand that your value was never dependent on their appreciation. It was always there within you. The most powerful thing you can do is walk away with your head held high, knowing that you never had to beg for love, respect, or attention. You never had to convince anyone to see your worth. And when they finally realize what they lost, you will smile, not out of revenge, not out of bitterness, but out of the pure knowledge that you chose yourself. And that, above all else, is the greatest power you will ever hold.